Hey, did you know there's a town in America that's been on fire for more than 60 years? Picture this, a small town in Pennsylvania in the 1950s. Church bells ringing on Sundays, kids riding bikes down Main Street, and families gathered around kitchen tables. That sounds like every other American town, right? Well, it's not. Something happened beneath their feet. A fire started deep underground, and once it caught the veins of coal running through the earth, it never stopped. Sidewalks cracked open, streets buckled, and the smell of sulfur filled the air. And before long, Centralia, Pennsylvania became something out of an apocalyptic movie. So how does a fire like that even start? And more importantly, why can't anyone put it out? That's today's story on Hey Did You Know? I want to welcome you all to the first episode. This is a project that I've been working on for the last 2 years, and I can't tell you how excited I am to finally get it started. The goal here is really just to share stories that you may not have heard every day, from strange small town stories to creepy folklore to even bizarre moments in American history that sound just too wild to be true. Some of those tales are historical, some are going to be mythical, and some you'll just have to decide for yourself. So join me on this journey. I don't know how many episodes I'm going to make, don't know where this will go, but each episode I'm going to give you something that's going to make you want to turn to your friends and say, hey, did you know? So let's get started with our story for today. Centralia wasn't always a ghost town, and in fact, it was once a thriving little community. It was founded in 1850 and sat atop some of the richest anthracite coal in all of Pennsylvania. That coal was black gold, or at least that's how they seen it. They used it to power trains, heat homes, and fuel the local industry. And by the 1940s and 50s, Centralia had around 1,200 residents. It had schools, churches, taverns, and it was a tight-knit community where everybody knew each other. The streets were lined with modest homes, and at night you could see the orange glow of miners' lanterns as they walked home from the pits. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. It was a small town, steady and reliable. That is until 1962. In late May of that year, right before Memorial Day, local firefighters were assigned a simple job: clean up the town dump. Seems like a simple job, right? Easy. They've done it every year. This wasn't something that they had been doing for the first time. The dump was an old strip mine at the edge of town, and the way they handled trash back then, they burned it. So they set the pile on fire, just like they had done many other times before, except this time, it wasn't like every other time before. Beneath the dump, cracks in the rock connected to old coal seams, and once the flames reached that coal, it was like lighting a fuse. Coal doesn't just burn, it smolders. It can stay hot for decades, even centuries, if the oxygen is there to feed it. At first, no one was worried. Coal fires had happened before. People assumed this one would burn out, just like the other ones. But weeks went by, and the smoke did not stop. By the 1970s, the whole town could tell something was wrong. Smoke and steam started rising from the cracks in the ground, and the air smelled like rotten eggs, which, if you know, that's what sulfur smells like. Grass and trees were starting to wither away in patches where the earth had leaked heat, and by then, the ground itself started to shift. Streets were buckling, sidewalks were splitting, cars were sinking into the earth, and inside homes, things were not any better. Carbon monoxide seeped up from below and started filling people's basements with poisonous gas. And then came the moment that put Centralia on the map. Statewide attention to the fire began to increase in 1981 when a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski was playing in his grandmother's backyard, and the ground suddenly gave way beneath his feet. A sinkhole more than 150 feet deep opened up and started to swallow him alive. He clung to a tree root until his cousin, 14-year-old Eric Wolfgang, saved his life by pulling him out of the hole. The plume of hot steam billowing from the hole was measured to contain a lethal level of carbon monoxide, so Todd was very lucky to make it out alive. Although unfortunately later in life he began to suffer nightmares and even develop post-traumatic stress disorder, and to cope, he turned to prescription medication, and unfortunately, in 2022, he died of an overdose. Back in 1983, the government had had enough of this fire. They used millions in federal funds and started buying out residents and demolishing houses. Street after street, they emptied the town until the town looked like a patchwork of bare lots and empty foundations. But not everybody wanted to leave. Some families fought to stay. They argued that the fire wasn't as dangerous as the government claimed, even though it just tried to eat a 12-year-old boy 2 years earlier. But whoa, what do we know? They loved their homes, and they didn't want to abandon their town, even if it was falling apart around them. Legal battles dragged on for decades, but slowly, one by one, the holdouts gave in. In 2002, the U.S. Postal Service discontinued Centralia's zip code, and by 2006, only 16 homes were left standing. In 2009, Pennsylvania's Governor, Ed Rendell, began the formal eviction of the remaining Centralia residents, and to this day, well, the last census at least, there's only 5 residents still standing in Centralia. So, if you're wondering, why didn't they just put out the fire? They tried that. A 3-option proposal was drawn up in 1963, with the first option costing around $277,000, which consisted of entrenching the fire and backfilling the trench with incombustible material. The second option, which cost around $150,000, offered a smaller trench in an incomplete circle followed by the completion of the circle with a flush barrier. The third plan was a, quote, total and concerted flushing project, end quote, larger than the second project's flushing and costing only $82,000. But the state abandoned this project in 1963. So, really to do anything was a lot more money than what the town was worth. So they just made the choice to let the town burn. There was many hypothesized, there was many of them that, a lot of different ideas as to how the fire actually started. The Memorial Day dump cleanup fire was one of the many hypotheses, but a lady by the name of Jane Quigley in 2007 wrote a book called The Day the Earth Caved In. And she stated that the fire was actually started the day previously. She believed that a trash truck had dumped hot ash or coal that was discarded from coal burners into a open trash pit. She even went as far to get minutes from a local borough council meeting in June, and noticed that in the minutes it referred to 2 fires being at the dump. She went on to tell that the borough, by law, was responsible for installing a fire-resistant clay barrier between each layer of trash in the landfill, but they fell behind schedule, which left the barrier incomplete, which allowed the hot coals to penetrate the vein of coal underneath the pit, lighting the fire. Not only did she cite the council meeting minutes, she also cited interviews that she did with volunteer firemen, the former chief of police, borough officials, and several eyewitnesses as her sources. But not only did she have a hypothesis, there was another one that said the fire was burning long before the alleged trash dump fire to begin with. According to a local legend, because we love legends on this podcast, that's going to be our whole thing. In 1932, there was a fire at the Bass Colliery, which was started by an explosion, and apparently it was never fully extinguished. That is this theory's belief. So people are saying that in 1962, the fire that originally started in 1932 had officially reached the landfill area. But there was a man who disagreed. His name was Frank Jurgel Sr., and he claimed that he operated a bootleg mine with his brother in the vicinity of the landfill between 1960 and 1962. And he says if the Bass Colliery fire had never been extinguished, he and his brother would have been killed by the gases. There was one more hypothesis that came around. A letter was sent to the Lehigh Valley Coal Company by the Centralia Council in the days after the mine fire was noticed. The letter described, quote, a fire of unknown origin starting on or about June 25th of 1962 during a period of unusually hot weather, end quote. So this may be referring to the hypothesis of a spontaneous combustion problem, that being the reason that the fire started in the landfill. And a lot of people actually accepted this as the correct reason for the fire for many years in the state and federal governments. So I guess really nobody knows exactly what happened. That's what it sounds like to me. There's a bunch of different ideas, but I guess with anything that happens, there's always a lot of different sides of the story. You'll never really know the exact story unless you were the first person account. But even then, as time goes on, the story is going to get thrown around different ways. I'm sure even if you've happened to hear this story before, you've probably heard it in a different rendition than the way that I'm telling it. So I did want to throw in one more fact. Not only did this pretty much destroy Centralia, they tore down all the houses and kicked everybody out, a town a few miles away named Burnsville was also affected by the Centralia mine fire, and that town too had to be completely abandoned and leveled. So 2 towns somewhat close to each other destroyed by this one fire that nobody knows how it started. So yeah. Today, Centralia has grown to be a bit of a tourist attraction. The streets are still empty. They don't go anywhere. The sidewalks are crumbling. There's a cemetery that sits on top of a hill overlooking all of the smoldering ground. And for years, one of the most popular attractions was right off of Route 61, a little portion of Route 61 called Graffiti Highway, which you may have heard. You may have seen pictures of it if you've heard the story before. It was an abandoned stretch of Route 61, which was covered in spray paint by visitors coming to see, an abandoned road. What are you going to do? You're going to leave your mark. That's what everybody likes to do. So it was covered in spray paint, but in 2020, the state finally buried it under dirt so that people wouldn't come to visit anymore. So friends, that is the story of Centralia, Pennsylvania, the town that has been burning since 1962. It wasn't destroyed by a war, it wasn't destroyed by a famine or some biblical disaster. It was undone by something invisible, something beneath the feet of the people living there. A fire that started from no more than a burning pile of trash. Or, if you believe the other stories, it was started by another mine fire from 30 years before. Or just spontaneous combustion. Whatever it was, it started. And scientists believe that it might burn for another 250 years. So you and I will all be gone, and this fire will still continue to burn, and people will still continue to hear this story about this fire that's been burning since 1962. But thank you all for listening today. I don't know how long this episode's going to be after all the editing down. Don't know what I'm going for with length here, but I just want to thank you all for listening if you listened to the whole thing. If you enjoyed, please share it with a friend, share it with a family member, share it with your pastor. I don't care. But don't forget to follow me here on whatever you're listening on or whatever I have this posted on. Follow me everywhere, really, because you're not going to want to miss the next strange story that we have coming up and the many more episodes that we have. Thank you so much, and goodbye.